Hello folks, welcome to Resource Allocation and the Market, and we would look in particular at demand and supply. Now, this screencast was prepared by myself, Persad. Now, I want you all to think about something. It might sound like a weird question, but what was the demand for cars in the year 1100? What do you all think? I'm sure a lot of you all would say none, because there were no cars at the time. However, if you ask a local Trinidadian at the time, would you like to have a vehicle which would allow you to travel much faster and could carry much more weight? What do you think this local Trinidadian would say? He would say, of course, because it would save me time and effort. Therefore, guys, there was a demand for cars in 1100, although it was an unspoken demand, because no one could have named a car as a solution to the transport problems at the time. But surely, everyone wanted to make their travels more effective and efficient. However, it was the supply that was missing. I'm sure that you all would agree that we as human beings always want to make our lives easier. We always want to have more time to live our lives in a more convenient way, right? There's always going to be a demand for goods and services that is going to satisfy our needs. I'm sure you all would agree with this. Therefore, we need to find someone who can supply us with these things, right? We therefore need supply for our demand. Now, at the end of this very interesting screencast, you all would learn the definition for the terms demand and supply. You all would be able to interpret demand and supply curves. Interesting stuff, right? You all will be able to explain the determinants of demand and supply. In other words, what determines demand and supply? You all would be able to interpret elasticity of demand. You might ask, what is elasticity of demand? Well, we'll get to that in a short while. You will also be able to interpret price elasticity from a graphical representation. Now guys, don't get frightened. It's very easy. We'll get to that in a little while. Now, I'm sure you all would have heard about the terms demand and supply before. It's nothing new really. You would have known demand simply as how much of a product or service is desired by buyers, and supply simply as how much the market can offer. Now, for the purpose of this course, the definition of demand is the willingness and ability to pay for a commodity at each and every price over a given period of time and subject to all else being constant. Now, this is a definition that you all must learn for the final exam. This is a demand curve. It looks difficult, but it is quite easy. What you basically have to know is that a demand curve is downward sloping, and it depicts the relationship between price of a commodity, which is seen on this vertical axis, and quantity, which is seen on this horizontal axis. So, it depicts the relationship between price of a certain commodity and the amount of it that consumers are willing to and able to purchase at a given price. It is a graphical representation of a market demand schedule. Now, you might ask yourselves, what determines demand? Well, the price of the commodity, I'm sure you would agree. Also, the prices of other commodities, such as complements and substitutes. In addition, consumer income or wealth. And finally, consumer taste. As you can see in this diagram, some persons prefer Coca-Cola and others prefer Pepsi. Now, this is an activity for you all. I want you all to put this video on pause and take 5 minutes to write down with examples what determines demand. This has to be submitted to your lecturer by email before the next class. This diagram here, don't freak out, it's quite easy, is a graphical representation of the increase in demand. Now, point A to B is caused by a fall in price, and point A to C is caused by an increase in income. Take a minute to let this sink in. It's quite easy. We would now look at elasticity of demand. This formula might look frightening because you might be seeing it for the first time, but it's quite easy. Basically, price elasticity is the percentage change in quantity demanded over the percentage change in price. And yes, you have to remember this formula for the final exam. Elasticity of demand shows the responsiveness of demand to price. If price elasticity is less than 1, it is inelastic. If price elasticity is more than 1, it is elastic. And if price elasticity is 1, it is unitary elasticity. And you may ask, what determines elasticity of demand? Well, the availability of substitutes. This is yet another graph that you have to familiarize yourself with. It is the price elasticity illustrated. For the purpose of this course, you also have to learn the definition of supply, which is the willingness and ability to sell a commodity at each and every price over a given period of time, subject to all else being constant. And all else being constant is ceteris paribus in Greek. So don't get confused by these words, ceteris paribus. Okay, so this is yet another graph, and as opposed to the demand curve that was downward sloping like this, the supply curve is upward sloping. And it is a relationship between product price, which is seen on the vertical axis here, and quantity of product, which is seen on the horizontal axis here, that a seller is willing and able to supply. Product price is measured on the vertical axis of the graph and quantity of the product supplied on the horizontal axis. What determines supply? The price of the commodity, the prices of factors of production, state of technology, and other goals of the firm. This is another graph for you all. Yes, in economics you would come across a lot of graphs, but you just have to take your time and look at them individually, and it's quite easy. This one as well is quite simple. A to B is caused by an increase in price. So it's this slope here. And A to C is caused by improved technology. Makes sense, right? Elasticity of supply. This is the formula that you have to remember for the final exam. It is the percentage change in quantity supplied divided by the percentage change in price. And it basically shows the responsiveness of supply to price. Now you have to remember this for the final exam as well. If supply elasticity is less than 1, it is inelastic. If supply elasticity is more than 1, it is elastic. And if supply elasticity is 1, it is elasticity. Unitary elasticity that is. And what determines elasticity of demand? Well, flexibility in production. This graph is supply elasticity illustrated. Take a minute to look at this graph. It's quite easy stuff based on what we discussed before about what is supply elasticity. Now, I want you all to watch this exciting and fun video over and over again so that the definitions and concepts of demand and supply will stick. Yes, it's the only way it will actually stick. Also, I want you all to practice drawing the graphs that you saw in this video. I know it's a lot, but practice makes perfect. You will have to apply the knowledge gained in this screencast in an individual quiz. You will receive detailed feedback on this quiz so that you can correct whatever isolated problems which you may have with this topic. You will be shown what was done correctly, what must be improved, and explanations would be included based on a rubric. You will be allowed to see content areas that you have not mastered. Please refer to your course outline for more information on this. Now, just to recap, you would have learned the definitions of demand and supply, also the concepts of demand and supply. Thank you so much for watching this video. And if you require further information, visit the Economics Network at this link that you see here. Bye-bye.